Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Mayor of Kingstown. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This episode also presented a really interesting thing where we kind of got to see that like Mike's position as the mayor isn't the end-all be-all, because he shows up at the crime scene in the aftermath of everything with Ian and Kyle when they ended up shooting the guy at the pizza place. That the fact is the cop was like, "Are you a cop?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "Don't wait behind the line." He had to get someone else to come and get him. And I love that scene of the cop that didn't let him through was almost looking like, "Wait, what? Who is this guy?" Like, I love that because like you would think everyone's in the know because it seems like a lot of people, but it seems like only like the higher up. I guess like the more lower on the totem pole cops probably wouldn't know who he is, but like, probably most people don't know who it is. But if you're a criminal, you have some ties to the criminal world, you tied to law enforcement in a higher position like the DA, that's the person he was kind of banging it out with, like I believe last episode in like the bathroom, but she was like, "No, we're not going to go out on a date," you know? So, but obviously like one of the people, well, Mike ends up doing what he does. Like he is very like social. You wouldn't think he is, but he is able to just slip in and out of the conversations because like he sees the everyone like talking to the guy that Kyle and Ian were pulling up on last episode because they thought he was the one actually going to rob the place. Well, when that's all said and done, there's a guy, Tom, I don't know what his position is, but he was talking to Ian and Kyle about like, we need to try and get this story straight, because if we take this to like the precinct or whatever, we get representatives involved, it's going to become official. But Mike is like, "No, like I see you breaking like their rights and stuff like that, especially because you're having these conversations in front of the DA. But Tom was like, "I'm trying to get their story straight, because if their story starts contradicting each other when this does officially become official, then it's going to be a problem." But basically it turns out like Mike is the one that figured out that this was a drug deal. He's like, we could shift the narrative to make it seem like my brother and Ian like stepped in on a drug deal, because at the end of the day he's trying to do everything he can to like help his brother out. So I love that he's like, "Hey, you okay?" And Ian's like, "Yeah, I'm good too, Mike, thanks for asking." But it turns out home dude behind the register did like have priors related to drugs and stuff like that. So that's why home dude was waiting. Like he was trying to like wait till the coast was clear so he could buy drugs from the guy. It's like, right, he spent 7 years in prison, and it's like, you'll find the drugs. It's kind of the narrative they create. So the DA is like, "All right, just leave the body here so they can like look for what they need to." I don't know if that's supposed to be indicative of like, because I kept like the moment they're like, "Oh, like look for drugs," I'm like, that sounds like some planting type of stuff. I don't know whether they were just being sincere about, no, just keep looking, you'll find drugs, or whether that was him asking the DA to leave it the body behind so they can sprinkle a little drugs, and then eventually you'll find the rest of the drugs. I don't know if that's what that was supposed to be indicative. My mind was just like how I just see the worst. I'm just like, oh, they're going to do some corrupt shit. Like, that's my initial thought, which, you know, the fact is my mind immediately went there during that conversation. Whether that's what that was implying or whether that's what's really going on, the fact is my mind goes there immediately. I don't know, maybe that speaks volumes, you know, just about my perspective. But once again, not like it's not indicative of real cops. Just like, you know, you watch a crime drama, I'm always looking for like that's probably going, you know, the cops are already kind of shady enough that like Mike can maneuver and position you guys to be like, "Yo, the guy who killed my dad, like judge, jury, and executioner his ass," you know. So like, you know, so that's why I'm like, they can manipulate situations, and Ian had Mike like, he gave Mike the wrong information so Mike would run into the dude's car, so they're like, "Oh, look at what spilled out on the streets. Oh man, we're good. We got what we needed. It's a solid case now." It's like, you know, manipulative, like loophole type of stuff like that, you know. So we'll see. But other than that, Mike's, you know, I guess we're going to still be seeing the aftermath of that. I don't know if that's necessarily fit, because Ian and Kyle are supposed to be on desk duty, but because everything's so short-staffed, they ended up kind of being in that meeting about Carlos. So there's that. So we'll still probably be dealing with the aftermath of that going forward too. Because the complication is like what comes up in the conversation is that Ian and Kyle didn't identify themselves as cops. So the perspective could be like that the guy behind the register could have just thought like, "Oh, you were trying to like cause some issues. You were dangerous people. He didn't know you were cops, so that's why he opened fire on you." So, you know, we'll see how things kind of play out going forward. I don't think we've seen the end of that quite yet. Because the meeting they were in, though, was about taking down Carlos, which you kind of feel bad because they hard cut when they take Carlos down, because apparently, like, him getting arrested again, like, instead of getting 3 strikes, he technically got 4 because of like there's some like loopholes and like how he was able to find his way around it. But getting arrested this last time because of Mike put Carlos in that position. So I wonder, is he going to be pissed at Mike for this? It's like, right. Or is he going to actually try and get... Well, it might help Mike in the long run because Mike needs someone on the inside, which that Carlos thing might end up being beneficial to him in certain regards. We'll see how that plays out. But because, I mean, there's a lot of... I mean, obviously, the prison is like the core crux of the show. So, of course, everything is going to kind of revolve around it to some extent. But like the point I was making is like I felt so bad because like we're hard cutting between Carlos getting locked up and his one of his dogs getting locked up. In fact, neutered. I was like, I didn't need to actually see that. I know it's fake and everything, but I'm like, I still don't need to see that. I'm like, it just it hurts me to look at. I was like, you poor bastard. But I just thought it was interesting. Like they intermittently kept cutting back and forth between the two, experiencing the same thing of being locked up behind a cage. Those dogs were set up for dog fights anyway, weren't they? So you're just like, this is, I mean, it's better, right? Than their previous circumstances. I don't know what actually, what will happen fully for a dog that has been in a like set up for a dog fight situation, because that dog can't be because I don't know if that's a rehabilitation type of thing of like, can you rehabilitate a dog that's been trained to fight? Like, can you like work that out of their system? I don't know like what's going to happen to that dog at the end of all of this, as well as the other dogs. But that might have been like the main one. But regardless, the reason why I was bringing that up about Carlos being inside and maybe how beneficial that is, because, well, the guards are dealing with the fact is that they put Bunny's cousin in his place. They even fed him literal shit in a bowl. Because they were like, Ed was laughing about it. Because they're like, oh, who actually fixes the one? And Ed was like, Calvin. And just like, I was like, what does that mean? Like, my mind immediately went like, is he rubbing his balls on the food or something? It's like, oh, no worries. He literally fed him shit in a bowl. And he threw it away. He's like, oh, I'm going to need that bowl. And the guy was like, come and get it. The guard was like, oh, I'm going to need that bowl. He's like, come and get it if you want. And he just gave them the bowl back. I'm like, man. But that's something Bunny's bringing up later on. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like, you didn't want none of this, but they keep pushing. They are forgetting who does run that prison. Like, because they have the numbers. Once again, it's like, at least compared to everyone else, the numbers is like 10-1. I don't know if it's like that to the guards, but it's like, oh, they keep pushing. They're going to have an issue. They don't want to awaken the beast, So it's like, right, he's going to talk to the guard because they're trying to assert their dominance. It's like, oh, you try to step to us. You came in with your hands out asking for more. We're going to put you in your place. It's like, yeah, it could come back to bite all of you, especially with what they seem like they might be setting up with the Ernest storyline. Like, I think Ernest is going to get pushed by them or something. I mean, it seems like he's already got a terrible situation in life, like, to the fact that he was eating food from the same food that the prisoners eat. They're like, well, are you eating Vienna sausages? Like, what happened? He's like, I forgot my lunch. It's like, man, like, oh, the mayor and everyone there, like, the prison guards are like cracking jokes about him. But we see his situation at home. He's literally jerking off in the shower. His wife is yelling at him like, oh, do you know when the last time I left the house? Your son vomited on himself like a sea of vomit, and because you were too busy in there jerking it off. And it's like, oh, clean this up and stuff like that before you go to work and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, definitely like a situation, like he seems like the type of dude that's going to snap. And I don't know which way they're going to take that story, whether he's going to snap and kill his wife, or whether like someone is going to, like, not less it's just, he's going to be so pissed at home that he can't do anything, that he's going to take it out on the wrong person at prison, and it's going to escalate some type of stuff. Just like Home Dude's nephew in like the first and second episode, that thing, maybe we'll get something a little indicative of that from Ernest as well. We'll see. I'm just curious, like, there's a lot of storylines in this particular episode they're setting the groundwork for, which is interesting. Like, you get little moments throughout, like, of, like, certain storylines, but you're like, where that's going, there's multiple directions, and that's one of those stories I'm curious to see how that one plays out. But, other aspects about the prison I was going to bring up too is, there's a guy, Deshard, who came to Mike for help, and he's like, oh, my 16-year-old brother or whatever got pinched for something. He's getting a book thrown at him, but Mike is saying like, no, like, I know you're lying to me, because there's no way like a first timer would go so hard on him about it. So what's most likely is the people you used to run with, your gang, is coming after him. So you want him like protected and looked after. And it turns out, yeah, because apparently Duchard is a rat. Because Bunny was like, oh yeah, like, where he at? It's like, yeah, he came to my place, and it's like, it's like, I forgot what he was Mike had referenced like, oh, he's a straight A student, and then and then Bunny was like, oh, if he's a straight A student, that must mean I have a PhD. He's like, no, I looked at his transcripts and everything, but he's also like, right, just because the kid's got straight A's, that don't mean anything, you know. But he's just like, Mike's like, I don't care what you do to Duchard. Like, that's his business. The only person I care about is his little brother. Like, just kind of loosen the grip on him. The kid just wants to walk away from all this. Like, because he was like, oh, what Duchard think this is? The boy? No, what does his brother think this is? The Boy Scouts? You can just leave whenever you want. You can quit. It's like, no. But Mike's just like, loosen the grip a little bit. Let the kid just have at least some chance to see what he can make of himself. Just give him an opportunity. Duchard, you can do whatever you want to. Like, he made his own bed. At least leave his little brother out. Because, like, you know, his little brother won't fall hard because of all this. It's like any like thing on his records, he's 16, it's not going to stick. Like, your stuff on your, like, I think unless it's something super severe, but most stuff kind of gets sealed behind your records, like the moment, like if you're a minor. So it's only stuff will stick on your record where you're like 18, I think. Well, I'd like to say, I think it depends on like the super severity of it, whether or not that's the case or not. But there's also someone from the DA's office, Mr. Shaw, came to Mike about there was a bad guy, what's the guy's name? It's James something. Apparently he's a sick dude. Even Bunny's like, because Mike was like, oh, you got anyone near that guy? And Bunny's like, that sick motherfucker? He's like, I don't get it. You white people won't get into gunfights to save your own life, but you'll eat 20 children? I'm like, yo. Because apparently Mr. Shaw's like daughter was kidnapped by this guy, and he's like, oh. And he's like, no, guy kidnapped my daughter and murdered her and did a lot worse. I was like, oh, and Mike's like, oh, I didn't realize they found her body. And he's like, they didn't, but he confessed to it. The complicated thing is that Mr. Shaw doesn't want him just to get off easy. Like, his execution's in 2 weeks, and it's like, I don't want him, the longer he is alive, the more suffering he goes through. He doesn't get the easy out of just getting murdered. I mean, getting executed. But it's also like, if they open this Pandora's box, he can keep like confessing the stuff he didn't do until he's like 80, you know? Because for every confession like he brings up, it opens up a new trial he has to go to trial for, so that adds more and more. So like, this could add like 3 or 4 more years, you know? But it's also like, right, you need to make this happen in the next 2 weeks, and Mike's like, that's not enough time. Because he chose not to do for money, and he was like, oh, like, kind of, I forgot what Shaw had said. He made some comment about, oh, is it because let money be the motivator? He's like, money's not a motivator for me. He's like, oh, he's like, pity and money have never been a motivator for me. He's like, oh, must have never had much or something like that. So that's kind of a thing we're getting breadcrumbs of. Let's see, like, okay, so what's that's going to turn into? Because Bunny didn't give him any lowdown like this episode about that. But that's what I was bringing up earlier about Carlos. I wonder, is Carlos going to be his inside guy to get close to him to find out something? But other than that, Bunny did actually have a favor for Mike. And it's like, yo, I want you to drop my nephew off Hakeem to hockey. And Mike's like, wait, what? He's like, come on, like, I'm asking you a favor. He's like, oh, you ever do it? Ask me for it. He's like, come on, Mike, dude. He's like, all right, come on. And it's just like, you know, he's like, yeah, I love this thing we got, Mike. He's like, I forgot what he said. He's like, you're something. And Mike's like, yeah, I feel more like a bitch. He's like, nah, yeah, we good. But when he drops Hakeem, when he's taking Hakeem to hockey, we find out why Hakeem's all about hockey. It's like, well, first and foremost, like, oh, how you know my uncle? And it's like, it's a long story. Prison? He's like, well, I guess not that long of a story. I'm like, okay, cool. That interesting. Well, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, because even Carlos knows Mike. He knew Mike back when Mike was in prison. So I just didn't realize that that's where that connection came. I didn't know if that was like a connection through Mitch or whatever. But it's like, no, like Mike and Bunny knew each other probably in prison. And then maybe like Mike is the one that connected him to Mitch in the first place, and how a lot of their like in business and interactions came about. But for Hakeem, like, Hockey, it's his way out, you know, because he's like, yeah, I don't want to go to prison, you know, and it's like, Mike's like, yeah, I don't recommend it, but hockey, it's like, but he's like, yeah, like, I don't want to go to like Tampa Bay because like their uniforms. He's like, yeah, but if you go to Detroit, that's not getting out. He's like, now Tampa Bay, that's in Florida, now that's getting out. But at the hockey game, I love Mike's just chilling, and one of the fathers comes over. He's like, oh, that kid? That's my kid. Which one's yours? I thought it would be funny if Mike would have been like that one and pointed to Hakeem, and it's just like, oh. And I would have loved, but it's like, Mike didn't say anything. All he said was like, oh, yeah, I see the resemblance between you and your kid. But that kid, like, on the rink started punking, like, Hakeem, and Hakeem hit him back, and the guy wasn't too happy about it, but Mike was. And then it got severe to the point the father started stepping in, and Mike is like, whoa, what are you doing? And then like beat the crap out of dad. Then other people in the crowd start fighting him. Hakeem's getting jumped by the other players. I'm like, ain't no one else in the same uniform going to help Hakeem out here? That's some BS. But then like Mike gets on the ice too, picks up the hockey stick, he's swinging around like, back up. It's all the dads and the kids on the ice. You're like, man, that's a wild situation. But Hakeem was like, yo, that was pretty sick, though. Mike was pissed. He's like, man, fuck them crackers, dude. He's like, because I guess Mike out of anything is just like, right, you're just a kid trying to make it. And it's like, why the hell won't they give you an opportunity? It's because you're different. Even the dad was like, oh, why don't you go back across the railroad tracks and play football or some shit like that. You just, like, even Mike was like, what the fuck is wrong with you, bro? It's just like, for him, it's just like beating someone down just because they're different. It's like, because he even has this interesting conversation with the DA later on. He's like, why is it that people won't let you get what you want? You know? Like, why do they feel the need to, like, wish for your failure? And she says, like, well, it's been part of, like, human design for, like, the past 10,000 years. In the past, if someone has something you wanted, you just go up and take it. But the thing is, now we're in a position where, like, nowadays, if someone has something that you want but you're not able to take it, you're gonna wish their failure because like even if I can't have it, I don't want you to have it either, you know? Because it's like, but the point was like with the Hakeem thing, it's like the kid just wants to play hockey. Like he ain't trying to start nothing. They started stuff with him. He was just defending himself, and it escalated into that, you know. But even Mike was like, hey, you could, you know, you can dish out a hit and you can take a hit. You could always go boxing. And he's like, yeah, you know. I've had, like, he said that line of, like, yeah, I've had experience, you know, taking hits. But he's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that for a living. But he's like, I'm not fast enough for football. I'm not tall enough for basketball. Because he talked about, like, yo, like, Serena, Tiger, they dominated these white sports, and you know that's what he came in to do. Is like this is the one sport, like if I could do this and I can dominate it, I can find my way out of this. I don't have to, you know. And because even I think Mike, having been in the prison system himself, like knows like I don't want that for you, kid. Like the fact is that this, you know, the hands are dealt against you. Like when you're trying to strive for something, people are pushing you back to be like, nah, go do this, do that, like because you're the outsider in that. But Mike is like, you know what? I'm going to come up with some boys, and we're going to have pipes. And the next game, we're going to ready to basically crack some skulls if we need to. He's like, oh, the next game's Friday. He's like, fine, I'm going to be there, and we're basically be squatted up, you know, to look after you. So, and just like Mike is just pissed. He's like, fuck them motherfuckers. I even love when Bunny sees him later on. He's like, yo, Hakeem think you Superman or something. And he's just like, fuck. And he's so pissed. He's like, man, Mike, you are pissed. So he's just like, I hate those. He was so pissed, you know. And I love that line from Bunny where he's just like, man, for 500 years, like he's like running, like unless Hakeem can run like a 4.3, it's like there ain't no getting out for him, you know. He's like, every guy, Hakeem's the only guy in my family that is that's not dead or in prison, you know. But eventually, like, he's going to end up there because it's like you have to run fast. He's like, that's the only way a black man is going to ever be free. Like, you know, we've been running for like 500 years. Slavery ended 150 years ago, and even still running is the only thing you can do. And he's like, and that still ain't even freedom. That's just money, you know, in the sense that it's just like, yeah, like you're still a part of this system no matter what. You get paid for it, but ain't no like getting out. You're always trapped in a larger system. It's just, yeah, the only difference is now you're getting paid to run, but it's not for some freedom. You're still going to be treated the same way. You could still, like, even with the money, running will only get you so far because you'll just end up dead or like, so there's like no real escape is kind of what Bunny was kind of hinting at. I thought that was like a really impactful line and perspective on things. Because Mike was talking about what really irritated, like, in that moment, like, all he could think about was Mitch, and it just made him fucking angry, just, I guess, think about Mitch being gone and everything. Which even, I love Bunny being like, yeah, I miss Smith. Mitch was smooth, but I like you too, because you're an asshole. But he also talks about, like, he wished people would turn off the street lamps because, because of things as they are, he can't see the stars. And Mike is like, in my cabin, there's no, like, lights or anything, none of that electricity, so you can see the stars clearly, and starts pointing out, like, all the different stars and stuff like that, like Orion and Taurus. He even says, like, it's so interesting that there's stuff, like, in Germany, they found stuff dating back to 38,000 years ago that implies that people saw the astrology, they saw Orion in the sky. So it's like, right, we're seeing what people saw 38,000 years ago, which is kind of really interesting when you break it down and think about it. It's kind of fascinating. But, like, yeah, the kinship and, like, friendship it is an odd pairing, but, like, Mike and Bunny, like, are kind of good buddies, and I like that. Like, I like them just kind of, like, sitting back and relaxing, and just talking shit, just, like, looking up at the stars and stuff, talking about that. Like, that's just, you'd never think you'd have that conversation, but they're having that conversation. But other than that, this episode, we have Iris. Her circumstances are that Milo basically wants her, like, he doesn't want her walking the streets because it's, like, I guess it's just not safe in Kingstown, but also it's like, there's no politicians for you to seduce here, so the best thing for you to do is be put to work at a strip club. So she had to strip in front of everybody, which even the guy running the place is like, you don't have to get on the pole, like, this ain't that type of joint where you're going to be completely naked, like, you're going to be doing it in clothes, so it's fine, just put your clothes back on. So, I don't know whether Joseph, because Joseph doesn't, like, he's weary of her at the very least. I don't know if I'd go as far as he doesn't like her, but there's definitely a contentious relationship there, because it seemed like he did it on purpose just to kind of, like, knock her down a peg or two or something. I mean, granted, it's also like, oh, let me show off the quote-unquote goods type of thing of, like, right, what she's going to bring to the club and everything. So it's like, oh, she's very beautiful, but Joseph's also like, she's a fucking black widow. Be careful, like, that woman, basically, she's a man-eater. She'll, like, chew you up, spit you out, like, inject you with poison, like, watch out for her type of thing. I'm like, yeah, I like that, because I think it's supposed to also be in contrast with, like, last episode, Mike told her she's not as strong as she thinks, whereas in this episode, it's like, yeah, she can be venomous, and I'm just like, but like I said, I don't know why. Maybe Joseph's just never liked her, just of how much of sway she has with Milo or something like that. But at the club, she ain't actually dancing. She's promising a dance, and she's making a whole bunch of money. It's like, oh, like, people, because she made a whole point about, people like mystery or something like that. The guy who runs the club made some reference, and she was like, oh no, the real mystery is in the eye. Oh, right. He was like, oh, you're gonna have to wear a G-string because, we gotta leave some mystery. And she was like, no, the mystery's in the eyes and stuff like that. And, but she's showing, like, oh, I don't need to actually dance to make money, It's just I'm selling these people on the promise of that. But he's like, eventually they're going to get tired of that and want you to actually dance. Like, you're lying. But it's just, like, she's very good at what she does. And I guess she's seeing a little bit of what Joseph was talking about, because it's like, she's like, yeah, but I'm taken. And he's like, oh, yeah, by who? I thought she at first was going to say Milo. And it's like, Milo, I would assume, like, Milo doesn't care about you like that. But no, she's like, oh, Mike? And like, he's like, yeah. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, wait. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, at first I was like, is that a you thing or is that a Milo thing? Like, is it because of what Mike said before that you're like, nah, like, regardless of what he said, I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna bag him because that's what my job is. And I'm not someone who ever backs down from a job. Milo gave me this job. I'm gonna see it through to the end. So I don't know if it's supposed to be indicative of that or whether that's just supposed to be, I don't know, because it's not like her and Mike are a thing. He kind of shooed you away last episode, and now it's just kind of like I belong to Mike or something. Because it's like, it's interesting using his name like that, considering, like, there's nothing really between you. But I guess because she knows, oh, I got him. Like, I got him on the hook last episode. Once again, that's why I'm like, I don't know how much of last episode was her, like, luring him in by seeming weak, or, you know, kind of like seeming like, oh, like I am some helpless bunny, when in actuality I am the Black Widow that Joseph says I am, or whether that all that was real. Like, I just don't know what to make of that. We'll have to spend more time. Like, we've only got little bits here and there about Iris. Like, I think once we get to spend a lot more time with her, we'll really kind of see like the truth behind a lot of this. I'd actually skipped over it, but there was also a part of that same conversation between the DA and Mike later on, when they were talking about the whole, like, you know, people wanting failure and stuff like that. And Mike is like, oh, you order something, because he's like, yeah, because of his face, because of the hockey thing. He's like, yeah, I can't even chew right now. But for her, it's like, oh, like, why are we pretending like you and me were pretending like this is a date just so you feel better about like having sex with me, you know? But for her, it's like, you are the last man on earth I would ever date, and that's what makes you so attractive to me. Like, at the end of the day, it's like, for both of us, like, let's not pretend like, we're trying to pretend like this could be a relationship or something. It's like, no, like, it's just, it's a release for both of us. You know, I just want to, like, go, like, let's bang it out and just move on. Like, there's nothing serious here. He's like, okay, and he puts money on the table, like, to pay off the dinner, and she's like, okay, don't be a dick about it. He's like, I'm not being a dick. She's like, no, you're being a baby. And he's just like, well, bye. Because it's like, basically, like, he needs more. It's not meant to be, because I guess whether it's Mike's past or just even just who he is in general, being like, your position as the mayor and stuff like that, your past, like, I could never be with you. Like, it can never be any more than sex. Like, because of your like, you know, it's like, everyone wants a little love. They want more than just sex. They want a relationship, you know? So it's like, right, that's all I kind of am to you. Kind of made it clear. So I was like, right. She's like, oh, you're being such a baby. Like, kind of like, you already knew what the deal is. It's not my fault you want it more. Obviously, like, a little similar to the whole, like, Leslie and Jackie thing in Hightown to some extent. But I guess that's potentially setting up the fact is that Iris, all she has to do is come back around and things will potentially swing her way, given enough time. Maybe. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.